Right. Hey, Rob, I'm Clue. So, forgive me. I'm a tad behind, if you will. So, wonderful event, the 200th Armory event at Battle Station Toowoomba, Queensland, Australia, right? Had some wonderful footage from the night, along with some actual featured games from some wonderful peeps. But to say my week's been a bit busy, I think is a little bit of an understatement. I'm starting a master's degree in a little bit now, so that's sort of priority one. But then my pets have also been awfully sick, so my dog has had to have surgery and had his gallbladder removed. So that's issue one. And then my cat has decided to get into a little bit of a kerfuffle and up with a giant abscess on his face. Superficial, thankfully, right? It's on the outside. It's just in the skin layer, right? So yeah, that popped about 2 nights ago, and it's just been wound care and clean up. So yeah, I haven't had as much time as I would like, and there's a lot of different videos that I want to get out there, starting, of course, with the actual games from the 200th Armory event night. So that is what we will be sort of speeding through. So hopefully I can get them all out in a timely fashion, one after the other, right? Starting, well, today. But yeah, first and foremost, casual event, right? So all the games are just casual, friendly fun. So if there's any, errors or misplays, I know one guy kind of forgot he destroyed his new horizon and started playing with two arsenals despite not having it anymore. So do forgive us all. And then same with on the editing side or anything like that, if I've missed any triggers. Because I will say, overall, this has been just a learning experience, right? So if I were to do it again, there are definitely some things that I would change. Mainly how I framed it all, right? So I did it table-wise, landscape, when I should have really done it portrait and really zoomed in on the playmats. You can see everything, you can see the artwork, but reading the cards might be a little bit more of a difficulty. So I've also edited, right? So it'll be the last played card and the current chain, if you will, right, to make everything nice and easy to follow along. But nonetheless, here we go. Hope you enjoy the games. Right, so starting off game one, we have Judge Chris on Arakni Marionette taking on Henry on Katsu. Now, Katsu can definitely do wonderful things, but is very much a burst game plan, right? You've got bonds, you've got Retrace the Past to really line up those big explosive combo turns. And then on the Arakni side of things, I think if they can just sort of wait them out, push past those initial real rough turns and just take it to the mid to late game, they should have it in the bag. But starting off, we swing with a Hunter's Clave, trying to get that early mark, blocked out by a Surging Strike. Then in comes a second Hunter's Clave. So I would personally probably be double blocking both these just because you don't know what's up the sleeve of the Arakni. I know there can potentially be something worse following the Hunter's Claves, but there you go. It's punished with a Toxin, right? So taking the Hunter's Clave to a 4, getting that 1 chip damage, and marking our cat. So I think on the Arakni side of things, landing the mark, landing a card in Arsenal is pretty much all you really want to start off. So I do think that's a very successful turn one. And they do roll, and they become Arakni Black Widow. So discard to give your Assassin attack +3, but then the on-hit effect for this one of being banish a card from hand is definitely quite dangerous. Now, we're going into the Katsu turn. So again, for them, they're just trying to really burst down this Arakni, right? Line up those big explosive combo turns. So starting off with a red Surging Strike for 5, right? So again, on the same flip side for Arakni, I would be thinking about just fully blocking these out, denying the Katsu trigger, right? Fetching a combo piece in essence for anything can be quite dangerous because it really just fixes up that hand. Now, for us, we can see that there are 2 Whelming Gust Waves in Katsu's hand, so landing the Katsu trigger, and it seems like they will, right? So it's blocked out by Leave No Witness, taking 2 damage and triggering Katsu, meaning they can discard a Whelming Gust Wave and now search for a Bonds of Ancestry, right? Which means that they can connect the dots, if you will, and fetch a bit more and lead to just an overall explosive turn. So in comes the Whelming Gust Wave. So on hit trigger for this, since the combo is active, they get to draw a card, plus it gets that +1 and go again, so it's a 4 coming in, and the Arakni just eats it, meaning that the Katsu gets a draw, play their Bonds of Ancestry for free since it's following a Gust Wave, right, and then banish a card from their graveyard to, well, fetch more combo pieces. So yeah, this is definitely a big turn to start off. Now, the Bonds is being blocked out by a Shelter on the Defense React, but in comes that second Whelming Gust Wave. So, Katsu's game plan has basically just sort of been achieved, right? Get some combo pieces in the graveyard so you can still fetch some more stuff, land an Arsenal piece, and also chip down the Arakni. So, landing 8 full damage in the first round. Now, how will the Arakni proceed, right? 2 cards in hand, 1 Arsenal, but they do have both the Black Widow trigger and a Command and Conquer. Now, the question on the Katsu side of things is whether or not that Break Tide hiding their arsenal is worth giving up 2 cards from hand, and I would say it's probably not, because again, you want to kind of just keep the tempo high pace, because going back and forth with damage, the Katsu should be on top of things, right? It's not until they start running out of those combo pieces that they really start to fall apart against Arakni, just, whittling down your hand here and there and getting that little chip damage across. But Arakni passes back to the Katsu, so now it's just up to Katsu to again continue trying to burst down Arakni, right? Once you get them probably around below 20, then it just becomes a bit more of a critical game where you're yoinking more cards from their hand and making them block a bit more reactively, right? Rather than trying to scrape by and then just send back a almost similarly devastating turn. But we're leading with a yellow Surging Strike for 4, which is being blocked by a Bonds of Attraction, meaning that 1 chip damage is getting across, again triggering the Katsu, allowing the Katsu to discard and try and fetch a better combo piece than what they have currently in their hand. So it's whether or not they like their hand, and I think a Whelming Gust Wave into a Mugen release is not so bad, but they will discard a Whelming to fetch, well, another Whelming, interestingly. But it is a slight upgrade, right? They've converted into a red, meaning it is a 4, which means it is that breakpoint, but the Arachne does deny it with a Shelter, meaning that the Katsu does not get the trigger, and then they lead with a Release, right? So a Release is coming in for 5, following up that Gust Wave, meaning it is primed and ready to trigger, so if it isn't blocked out, they can fetch up to 2 Lords of Wind, since 1 is already on the pitch stack, and they will activate their Breaking Scales to give it a +1, meaning it does hit over that 5 block and trigger, which means the Katsu does get to fetch his 2 Lords of Winds, which then could lead into, again, still a quite devastating turn, right? There's a fair amount of damage still on the table, right? So Katsu has the ability to follow on from the sequence of Release to Lord of Wind, meaning that they can pitch the other Lord of Wind into it, making it a +5 and being able to return Whelming Gust Waves and Surging Strikes from their graveyard back into their deck, right? I don't believe there's a Release in their graveyard, so it looks like they'll be grabbing 2 Whelming Gust Waves and a Surging Strike, returning them to the deck and ending their turn. So Arakni is most likely just going to pass it back unless there is something sneaky in their arsenal. I think maybe a Codex would do it, but I don't think there's anything great in their graveyard either to retrieve, right? And then disrupt the Katsu's turn, even with, say, a Flick. So they'll take the Tunic trigger and pass it back to Katsu. So Katsu is starting off by sending a naked yellow Whelming Gust Wave. So this hasn't had any of its triggers, so it doesn't get the +1, it doesn't have Go Again, meaning it's just a 2, but they'll hit it with an Ancestral Empowerment, which doesn't do anything for the block case, right? No chip damage, but does allow them to fetch 1 extra card, trying to look for something a little bit stronger for that follow-up turn, because it is, again, about putting your ducks in a row and just having that real explosive turn. Now, Arachne's coming in with a Pain in the backside, so that's a 3, threatening mark if it does hit, right? So it won't destroy the Hunter's Clave, but it will mark your opponent. And then Flusterfist to block it out, so it is blocked completely, so they will flick a Clave instead, still landing the mark, but losing 1 of their Claves, meaning that Arakni is now alive, so their next attack with Stealth gets a +1 and a Go Again if it hits. So they're using Orb Weaver Spinner Net to give their next attack +3 and equip a Graphene Cecilia, right? So what attack is better? They're looking at their arsenal, and it's going to be a Toxicity into, I assume, something nice and big. Yeah, it's a Mark of the Black Widow for 7, threatening the Banish from hand. The Go Again is not so relevant, right? But a big 7, 1 card from hand, and the Toxicity damage to go on top of that. So we'll be blocked out with 7 using the Breeze Rider Boots, along with 2 other cards from hand. So, yeah, there we go. Denying the Arachne, but still maintaining maybe something, right? Maybe a pitch into a Harmonized, but with the Mark trigger, they will roll, and they get to become Orb Weaver, right? So, well, they do have the Graphene equipped, so they do have a free swing under their belts, but to the Katsu's turn, they will pitch a Whelming Gust Wave to send in a Kadachi for 1, right? So not too big of an explosive turn, but they do need to wrangle it back a little bit, right? If they keep letting the Arachne go in with, 2, 3 cards, then they'll just slowly be picked apart as they send a little bit of chip damage, and of course, just infiltrate their hand, if you will, right, as an assassin. The Harmonized Kadachi is followed up by a Cyclone Roundhouse for 5, and it's blocked out with a Bonds of Agony for 3, meaning 2 damage will get across, but unfortunately Katsu has no more cards in hand to actually trigger their hero ability and fetch something even for their following turn. So now Arachne's going in nice and juicy with 3 cards, a free Dagger Swing, a Mark proc, and a Mark on board. So this should be quite quite the deadly turn for them. So they're starting off with their nice free dagger swing thanks to Orb Weaver, right? So it's coming in as a 1, and will probably just do a little bit of chip damage. I don't think this is necessarily worth blocking, right? You may be up to a +3, so a 4, plus then you have the shred effect. So I think on the nose, you probably take the 1 and you're just banking for something a little bit worse. It will clear the mark as well off of Katsu, followed up by a pain in the backside, threatening mark off the Hunter's Clave. So this is a 3, this is a bit more of a higher block priority, right? So the Katsu's hand does look kind of juicy. They have an Ancestral Harmony, a Bonds, I believe. It's hard for me to even read, but we'll see what happens when it gets their turn. So they will let the pain in the backside through, along with a cheeky little flick afterthought, right, for that little extra chip damage, clearing the dagger from the Orb Weaver, I assume, to be able to proc Orb Weaver as well. So I think they're thinking about, and they're actually going to get rid of the Mark of the Black Widow to proc Orb Weaver, re-equipping a Graphene and giving it +3. So looks like Arakni's trying to catch up on the damage side of things and keep things a little bit more even, right? So they're going in with a Codex, and there we go. That makes the discard of Mark of the Black Widow a bit more on the nose, right? So I assume that's what they're going to grab back nice and easily. They have the mark trigger from the pain of the backside, so it should be nice and easy to then just go Mark of the Black Widow with the +3 from the Orb Weaver discard, making it a nice big threatening 6 that does threaten an extra card from hand. So it's either lose 2 cards or lose 1 card, so it's all depending on what the Katsu has to follow. But they do have to decide on their Codex card, so it looks like they'll be grabbing a Breaking Tide, right? So they should be able to line that up again. You've got Retrace the Past to connect the dots, but in comes the Mark of the Black Widow 4/6, so yeah, just that question of 1 or 2 cards, and they are going to give the 1 card away. They're going to get rid of their Ancestral Harmony, so they do have Frailty going into their following turns. That does take off the damage of the Kadachis. They're kind of off the table, right? They're just zeros. The mark is cleared, and their Arsenal card will also suffer the -1 penalty. But the Arachni's finishing up, right? Drawing their hand back, meaning we're passing to the Katsu. The Katsu is going to trigger their Hardened Cross Trap to discount their next attack, and then followed up with a Descendant Gust Wave. So this is just a 3 go again, right? Its combo has not triggered. It's being blocked out by a layer of the Spider, remarking the Katsu, leading into another probably devastating turn for the Arachni, right? Now that they're back in their base form. But following up the Gust Wave is, of course, a Bonds of Ancestry, which does get its combo trigger, meaning that the Katsu does get to go and fetch. So they're grabbing themselves a Gust Wave of the second wind. As for the Bonds of Ancestry, it's being blocked out by a Sink Below, allowing Arachni to try and fetch something a little bit better. But that stops the damage, but not the turn. So Katsu comes in with a Gust Wave of the second wind. Its combo is not on the table, so currently it is just a 0 for 4, but it does trigger both Katsu and Breeze Rider Boots, giving it go again, and they're throwing links on top of it, meaning that Katsu gets to go and fetch himself another combo piece. Although Katsu has triggered himself, the hero ability, he has no cards to discard, meaning that it has been sort of spent, if you will, right? So they won't get a card off of that, but they do find themselves a Retrace the Past, which is being triggered, so it does have go again off of both itself and the Breeze Rider Boots, and it's coming in as a 4, and the namesake, right? Which means they can follow it up with that Break Tide from Arsenal, from that Codex. It does lose a little bit of power, right, from the Frailty, but still another 4 that, if it hits, is going to reveal a card from the top of the deck and allow them to continue this turn even further, because again, they have the Go Again proc from the Breeze Rider Boots. So, Break Tide coming in as a 4. It's whether or not Arakni just gives their whole turn away, or they let the preceding damage through. So, they are going to let the Break Tide hit, and it hits 100 wins for an extra 2 damage on top of that. So it's quite the powerful turn, right? Arachni's definitely in a vulnerable spot if they continue to let these big, long sequences through. But now they don't have to worry about any of the equipment procs. So Katsu is definitely starting to run out of a little bit of steam. So it's whether or not those 2 cards kept by the Arachni matter enough to debilitate. And there we go. There's a Persuasive Prognosis that will definitely start helping the caser along, right? So it comes in as a 2, thanks to the Arachni proc and the Mark. And that also means it's open to, well, some pesky attack reactions, which I'd have to assume are always on the table, right, against an Arachni. So the Katsu is looking like he'll just block it with a 3, a Cyclone Roundhouse, meaning we take up the mantle, and again, we get that Mark trigger, so it becomes a Mark of the Black Widow 4/7, punishing the Katsu further, right, doing a little bit of damage, and taking a card from hand. So maybe the Arachni can definitely claw this back, right? Mark's cleared, 16 life on the Katsu, 11 on the Arachni, but only 2 cards in hand to try and pull off a nice big turn. And generally speaking, right, their options are Kadachis, right, off of a pitch. They can send 1 card. If it lands, they get to Katsu, maybe find something better. But it does look like they have 200 wins, so I think that's probably just a turn in itself, if you will, right? Just send them both. So a 2 off of the yellow 100 wins, right? So this is kind of a question of whether or not to block, right? Because it does trigger the Katsu if you let it through, and it will be blocked out by a Mask of Deceit. So Arakni gets to roll, which could definitely lead into another devastating turn. So they hit an Arakni red back, so they get a +3 and a go again proc off it. So that is definitely a real scary turn going into 4 cards if they don't block out this 100 wins either. But even if they proc Katsu here from the damage, right, Katsu has no cards to discard, so they can't fetch something a little bit more decent to try and lead into another big offensive turn. So it does look like they're just taking the 3, so Arachni's down to 8, but now we get a full 4-card turn with red back on the table. So the Arachni is going to open with, most likely, I'd have to assume, right, a dagger swing. There's no reason not to just throw in the mark, right? But no, instead it is a Bonds of Agony, which is also equally scary, right? Because here's the question for you. How much do you think Bonds is worth? I always go in my head, it's an 8, right? It's just always nail on the table. But then you get this awful case scenario where you throw out 3 cards, and then the Arachni just does nothing with it, right? I mean, they have to give at least 1 card here or the snaps to give a go again, but aside from that, right, they don't really need to make it big. They could just take the 3-card loss and probably follow it up with something else. But they are going to flick away the Hunter's Clave, so that's their first reaction, right? They're going to give it snaps, giving it go again. So they have marked the Katsu, but they're not going to trigger Bonds itself, so it stays as a 1, but it does give them go again. They've yoinked 3 cards from the Katsu's hand, meaning they get to follow it up with an up sticks and run, so a +4, and if they pitch, which they are, they get to re-equip a dagger, so back comes the Hunter's Clave, right? So yeah, still a +4 with 1 card left on the Katsu side of thing. There's definitely quite the devastating rebound, right? They are floating a resource as well, and they do have their tunic trigger, so they are going to swing with their graphene, coming in as a 5, right? So just damage on the table. This is definitely a big, disgusting turn, right? So it's whether or not Katsu gives their final card just to negate some of that damage, or they're a little bit worried about the last card in hand. Now, generally speaking, I would be thinking, right, that the Arachni has done its job. It's probably just trying to save the card for their arsenal. But yeah, that damage is definitely kind of threatening. So, a couple lines of thought, right? Discard the card in hand. The graphene goes up to an 8, right? Or the follow-up's worse, and it's a Command and Conquer to boot. So a 6 instead of an extra 3 is definitely a bit more devastating. So they took the 5 from the graphene, they cleared the mark, and then it's just a 6 to follow it on, right? I think probably the Katsu just has to negate whatever damage they can with their final card in hand. I don't think it's worth trying to save it, stick it in the arsenal, pass back, and then just get, probably obliterated on 4 health, right, by the Arachni. So they do block it with a Gust Wave, right, so for 2, so they take 4, they're down to 6 to 8. This is definitely a nice, close back and forth game. So it will be Katsu's turn to just pass back to the Arachni, right, and then Arachni gets to come in swinging with 4 cards, both daggers still to boot, right? So yeah, they might have this in the bag. I think Katsu's kind of ran out of steam. They have no ways to fix up small turns, right? If they scrape by with 1 or 2 cards, I don't think they can launch a powerful counterattack in the same way that Assassin can with, well, debilitating effects like Mark of the Black Widow. So it's coming in for a 3, but most likely it's a 4, right? Flick with that clave to throw in 1 extra card. Although it's being blocked out by 6, so, it's negated the flick. I'd almost take the dagger, right? But the extra card from hand plus the chip damage, I don't know. It's a hard question always with Arachni, right? Because if you overblock, you just get baited, and then if you underblock, you get react. But the flick does come, they get marked, the mark of the Black Widow goes up to 4, and then they amp it with a Scars of the Redback, taking it to 7, landing that 1 extra damage, right? Meaning that the Katsu is given 2 cards to block, is still taking chip damage, and has to get rid of a card from hand from Mark's effect. So they're down to 4, and the Arachni still has 2 cards to boot. So, following that, what will it be? It is a Leave No Witness, right? So just 4 straight damage, right? Since there's no card in Arsenal. Now, they block it with a Gust Wave, they take 1 chip damage, and they bash the top of their deck, which is an Whelming Gust Wave, right? So, Arachni does actually get the contract trigger and get themselves 1 silver token. I'm sure that they'll come in handy, right? I mean, you can cycle, you can fetch. I feel like but just a blue in the hand is worth more with daggers on board and everything else that Arakni can do. But the Arakni is going to pass on to the Katsu, which of course Katsu only has the option to pass it straight back, redrawing 4 and leaving it up to the whims of whatever the Arakni has left up their sleeve. So we can see a cheeky toxin in there as an attack reaction. I'm sure that's gonna show its face, but we're starting off with a Savor Bloodshed for a +4, right? On hit for a dagger. If it hits a marked hero, they get to draw a card, so that's devastating itself. That's reason to block, but I don't think the Arakni has any way to really mark, right? They're just left with a Graphene. So a pain in the backside follows up, so that's 3 on the board, which has to be blocked out since the Katsu is on 3, and they still have to worry about that 5 dagger swing to come, thanks to the Savor Bloodshed. So they will have to block aggressively, right? Because again, attack reactions are still on the table. So yeah, they're in a real rough spot. I mean, we know that it's Tarantula Toxin, which has no bearings on pain in the backside, but of course the Katsu doesn't know it. So you'd have to assume that it's a gamble if they only give 1 card against the pain in the backside. But again, they have to give 2 for the Graphene, and that still probably leaves 1 other card in hand. So it is a Graphene to follow for 5, right? So he is definitely going to be 2 cards given. But of course, we know what comes next, and it's the Tarantula Toxin to finish the game, minusing 3 from their block and giving the Graphene another 3 to boot. Well, there we go. Game 1, set and done. Winner Arakni, winner Chris, right? Big thanks to, again, Battle Station Toowoomba and, of course, Henry and Chris for playing a wonderful game of Flesh and Blood. Hope you enjoyed. See ya.